I am a futurologist. Well, you're very polite. How can anyone have such a ridiculous job title as futurologist? How can you have an ology, which means a science, or a logic of the future? Isn't that a contradiction in terms? Like military intelligence? Or European harmony? Or as a very sad man said to me in a bar last night, married life. But the reason I use such a ridiculous term to describe what I do is to make a point about language. And just as we have no good word in English for somebody who studies trends which will shape the future, which is what I do, so we have no language for the future itself. I said this at a university not long ago, and a young woman said, "Excuse me, Mr. Hammond, excuse me, I think you may be mistaken, because surely Dante and Shakespeare and others writing hundreds of years ago had language for the future, because what they were writing then is as relevant today as it was at the moment they wrote." And I thought about it and I said, yes, young lady, you are quite correct. I should have said, we have no language for the technological future. Because when Dante and Shakespeare were writing, there wasn't that much technology in the world. But yet technology today is shaping all of our lives, and it will shape the real estate industry totally in the next 10 years. I will describe some of the ways it's going to do that in just one moment. To give you an idea of what's going on at the moment, I have to test the limits of language. We, collectively in the world, are building a new domain, a new environment that is always on, always connected, everyone to everyone, very soon, everything to everything, always and everywhere. And I've just used maybe 20 or 30 words to try and describe this new, and I don't yet have language to describe the smart environment we're moving into. I was reading a book, a bedtime book to my godson the other night. He's 2 years old. And my own children are now grown up. So the chance of reading a bedtime story to a small boy is tremendously exciting. And I said to his parents, may I read John a bedtime story? They said, of course. Just take a book from the shelf. So I went into his room and I snuggled up with him in the bed and I started to read a story about an elephant. After about 2 minutes, he reached over and he touched the page. And he touched the page again. And he said, book doesn't work. He will never know books that don't work. Always for him, when he touches a book, it will work. The always-on society means that when I walk along a street next year or the year after with my augmented reality glasses, every property that is for sale or for rent will tell me it is for sale or for rent, as I look at the street. I'm looking at you now, sir, and as I look closely, I can see your name on your badge. In 2 years' time, this will not exist. As I look at you through my augmented reality glasses, if you choose it only, I will see your name as I look at you, your company, your job position, your title. In fact, according to your own choices, I will see as much about you as you can give me. I can see the sort of property you deal in. I can see your areas of expertise, or, if you choose, as I look at you, I will see nothing. Your choice. But in business, in sales, we want the information to be out there. So as I look at you, I will see what you currently got to offer. And if I choose to, I can click, look at, or touch on any one of the items you're showing me. So as I look at you in this room today, I can see the properties you have to offer. I can see the price ranges. I can even, as I look at you, take a virtual tour. And to do that, all I need is to glance in the right direction. I don't even need to click. So today we might think the cutting edge is a virtual reality tour of a property. So if you have a high-end, expensive property, you may actually make a virtual tour, a product, so that you can see from a distance what the property is. Tomorrow, when I step into a property, I can glance and I can actually see the rating of the refrigerator. I can see what the media is. I can see what the energy efficiency is. So I glance at the ceiling, I can see what the lighting is, because I'll have the digital information that the real estate professional has delivered for me. Now, people always ask me, in almost every industry, what does the connected future hold for us? In real estate, because of the value of what you deal in, humans will not be removed from the chain. In some areas, like travel, for example, humans are being removed from the actual agency operation. In property, because of the value, the complexity, and the detail, real estate professionals will remain precisely where they are today. There is no risk of, and it's a horrible, horrible word, disintermediation, the removal of somebody in the middle. It will not happen in property because of the complexity and the value of the products. There will always need to be a professional in the chain. Now, there may be some low-value rentals, some low-value lettings that will actually reduce the role of the agency involved. But the moment it comes to a higher value property or a sale, humans will be central. Now, I said just now that my godson said to me, "Book doesn't work." The world we are moving into very quickly is one where I can not only look at you and see the information that today is on the name tag, but even if you do not publish your name, as I look at you, facial recognition software will identify you, assuming you have put your own picture anywhere on this new smart environment. So as you walk into a congress, as you walk into a party, as you walk into a social gathering or a business meeting, as you look at somebody, within milliseconds, you will have his or her name and as much information as he or she has posted about themselves. So be very careful today what you put out there about yourself. Youngsters, 17-year-olds, 15-year-olds, are busily putting every piece of private information about themselves online. This may not turn out to be a good idea. It is extremely dangerous to put information or images that you don't want to have in the future, because nothing goes away. I said a few moments ago at the beginning of my talk that we have no language for the technological future. And I would like now to give you some examples, a demonstration of this truth. This device that's hanging from the ceiling here is a projector, but in the English language, when it was first invented, we had no language for that technology. In English, we called it a magic lantern, because we didn't have any other way of describing it other than as a lantern that was magic, because it could throw images onto a wall. When the automobile, the motor car, was first invented, in the English language we called it a horseless carriage, because we had no other way of describing it other than the fact it was a carriage that didn't have horses. When the locomotive, the railway train, was first invented, we called it in English language an iron horse. The refrigerator was an icebox. Movies were talking pictures. An aeroplane was a flying machine. Radio was wireless. You didn't have wires. And so you will understand that always, when technology first arrives, we don't have language for it. So if we look at what's happened between those inventions of the 19th century and today, and we of course talk about television, we talk about computers, talk about networks, and we have today, the center of everything is the smartphone or the handy or, okay. Do you think that that is probably the best phrase, smartphone, to describe what it is we've got? I would suggest to you that it is as misleading as the phrase horseless carriage. And I will, a little bit later on, try and describe to you where I think the smartphone, the horseless carriage of today's generation, is going to end up, where it's going to go. But before I do that, I want to talk about some very big trends that are going to shape the market you will be operating in over the next 20 or 30 years. There are 5 or 6 major trends that are going to shape all of our lives in the next 25 years. The first is uneven population explosion. Now, in Europe, we are not going to have very much, if any, population growth. We are today 7 billion people on the planet, but the United Nations suggests that by 2030 there will be 8.2 billion people on the planet, and by 2050 over 9 billion people on the planet, and perhaps 10, or it could be 11 billion to follow. How are we going to find the food, the water, and the energy for another 2 or 3 billion people? Is it feasible? Can it be done? Well, I have asked experts all over the world about this, experts in agriculture, experts in energy, and I am told that yes, we will be able to feed another 3 billion people. And the main reason is that agriculture in many parts of the world is still at very basic, primitive, pre-industrial levels. So agriculture itself can be radically improved. Can we find the energy for another 3 billion people? That's more difficult, because energy, as you'll hear in a minute, is something that is central to what we have to worry about in the next few decades. But out of the three things I mentioned, food, energy, and water, it seems that water is the hardest one. Fresh water, there's plenty of it, but it's in the wrong places. And some people suggest that in 30 years' time, we will have a world that is covered in water tankers, where now we have oil tankers. And the world is covered in water pipelines, where we now have oil pipelines. I don't buy that view. I don't buy the vision. I believe profoundly that there will be new, cheaper, low-energy ways of turning salt water into fresh water, dirty water into clean water. It's possible at the moment, but it's an expensive and energy-intensive task. But I think as the need becomes greater, so we will see low-cost, low-energy desalination becoming the norm. How does population growth affect real estate? The answer is simple. More people in the world means more migration, more cross-border movement. Migration, immigration, is an unpopular topic with politicians. Because on one hand, politicians know that economic migration is good for economies. In fact, vital. On the other hand, politicians know that voters don't like the idea. So we have, on one hand, politicians knowing that the right thing is to encourage cross-border migration. On the other hand, they have to play to their voters who don't like it. So we have this very uneasy balancing act. For real estate professionals, it means more and more demand. It's as simple as that. The second big trend in the future is, of course, climate chaos. Now, some people use the phrase climate change. I don't like that phrase because it suggests that there will be winners and losers as the climate heats up. The fact is that we'll all be losers. And as climates become more extreme, what will matter more and more to real estate professionals is the energy efficiency of property. Which brings me immediately to the third big trend that's driving the next 20 or 30 years, which is energy and the need to move to cleaner and better forms of fuel. I am not an idealist. I am not somebody who believes that we must immediately stop using fossil fuels and migrate everything to wind, solar, hydro, wave power, etc. It's unrealistic, completely unrealistic. But what we have to do is to plan and manage a migration over the next 20 or 30 years to a far cleaner mix of energy. It can be done. I have to say that Germany and Austria is showing the world how it should be done. Parts of Europe are leading. Unfortunately, the rest of the world is not yet following. But we must migrate to a much leaner and cleaner form of energy mix. And as we go forward, the energy rating of properties that you handle will become more and more important. To the point that one of the first questions that potential buyers or potential lessees will ask is, what is the energy rating of the property? It will go from being something that is a legal requirement to something that is high on an individual list. We all know that the vast majority of property is historic. It's old. It's been built a long time. New builds are, of course, a rarity. But slowly, over a long period, retrofitting of more efficient windows, more efficient insulation, more efficient energy systems will become normal. And by the time we get to the middle of this century, almost every property, even if it's 500 years old, will have been made as efficient as it is possible for the property to be. Now, having mentioned the first three key drivers, which is, of course, population explosion, unequal population explosion, climate chaos, and energy challenges, I come to the fourth, which is also going to have a big impact on property and real estate professionals. And this trend is globalization. Now, globalization is a word that in some places can cause protests. Some people think that the idea of capitalism going global is evil, is wrong. I have the opposite point of view. To me, globalization is one of the greatest forces for good that exist. Modern globalization is only 15, maybe 17 years old. From the middle 90s till today, modern globalization has lifted, according to the World Bank, about 500 million people out of poverty. That's in China, Malaysia, Indonesia, Southeast Asia, parts of Latin America, Mexico, and in other territories. Now, that is more good, 500 million people, than has been achieved by all of the overseas foreign aid that rich countries have given to poor countries since World War II. And if you go into a poor country and you open up a call center or a factory, an assembly plant, whatever it is, and you offer a young man employment, you reach out and you say, here is a job, here is a potential career path, provided that is done ethically and sustainably, it will be very unlikely to take up arms against the rich world. He will be very unlikely to become a terrorist. Because a lot of so-called religious terrorism is actually an expression of poverty. It's an expression of no hope. It is an expression of rage against the rich world by the world that is less well off, although it will be dressed up as religious. Globalization has the power to bring another 2 or 3 billion people into a decent standard of living over the next 40 years. It is something that I believe is profoundly good, when done ethically and sustainably. And that is the key to all globalization. The fifth key driver of the future may, when I first mention it, sound irrelevant to you as real estate professionals. but it's relevant to every one of you individually. And that is the triple revolutions occurring in medical science. Now, most of you here will have, perhaps unconsciously, an idea of the age you think you may live to, if you are fortunate. And you may think to yourselves, well, I'd like to be a fit and healthy 90-year-old. You probably don't think to yourselves, well, I'll probably be a healthy and fit 100-year-old person or 120-year-old person. Well, I have news for you. Because of what's happening in medicine, those of you here today who are under 60, and those of you who think, well, I'll be happy to be a fit and healthy 85-year-old, will find themselves, on average, perhaps not me, perhaps not you individually, but on average, instead of being 85, you'll find yourself 95 and fit and well. Those of you under 50 make that 100 years old. Those of you under 40 make it 110. Those of you under 30, now, you may not believe me, but I need to tell you what the medical reasons are for me saying this. I stand here this morning as one of the few people in the world today who have had their own DNA decoded. My genes, having been decoded, tell me that if I ever have a heart condition, beta blocker tablets, which is a very common form of heart treatment, heart tablets, will not work on me. My genome won't respond to them. It equally tells me that if I was on a cruise ship and there was an outbreak of the vomiting bug, the vomiting sickness called norovirus, I could volunteer to clean up in the hospital on the ship because I can't catch the norovirus. Now, I mention these two trivial things. Beta blockers won't work on me. Norovirus, I can't catch it. Because it is indicative of the thousands of other things that my genome has shown. If we were to meet here in 10 years' time, you, all of you, will have your DNA decoded. Because for the health services of the world, whether they're private, whether they're state, the benefit of having your DNA in the cloud available to any doctor who treats you will completely outweigh the cost of doing the DNA profiling. And this is something that will profoundly change the way your health goes. The second thing about human health is, of course, stem cell research. Stem cell research is the beginning of a major revolution. Already, as you know, we can regrow parts of the body from stem cells, parts of kidney tissue, parts of skin, the esophagus, all sorts of things. The truth is, we're only just at the beginning. And if you are able to live another 10 years, and if you have the money, because it's all about money, you will not only be able to have backup organs available, you'll be able to regenerate yourself, to rejuvenate yourself. So that in 10 years' time, if I want to, I could look 20 years younger than I look today. Do I want to? No, I don't think so. But some people probably will. Now, I have futurist friends, futurologist friends, who say to me, Ray, come on, if we can just live another 15 years, we can live forever. And I say, why? And they say, because we can see the future that we are talking about. And I say, but I've already seen a lot of the future I was talking about 30 years ago. They say, no, come on, Ray, we can live forever. If we can just make it to 2035, the technology will be there for us to live forever. And I think to myself, well, okay, imagine that I am 95 years old. And I look like I'm 30 years old. I have my hair back. I have my skin vibrant. I'm slim and I'm fit and I'm brilliantly thrusting and virile. But my mind is still 95 years old. Will I really want to go out clubbing again when I'm 95? The sixth big trend is what I was talking about at the beginning, which is going to change all of your working lives over the next few years. And it is accelerating exponential technology development. We are in, I think, probably the most exciting period that I've ever observed. Because just as I said earlier about my godson saying the book doesn't work, I will indeed, 2 years or 3 years from now, if I meet you again in a conference room, the room will be alive. This room today is not dead. You've all got your smartphones, your iPads, your tablets, and you're all logging on. You're all connecting. A couple of years from now, it will be everywhere. I will point at the floor, and it will be a screen. I will point at the wall, it will be alive. I do that, and you have the data. That is just now. Imagine that in terms of marketing property. You walk into a property, and everything tells you what it is, where it is, its age, its condition. Everything is alive. I can see, merely by looking at that gallery, how many people it can hold, what weight it can stand, when it was built. Because somebody has thought that would be useful for this conference hall. And of course it is. Because if you were coming here to hire this conference hall, you might want to know exactly that piece of information. And what we will do is that every single item in the built world will carry its message. Every tap, every faucet, as the Americans say in a bathroom, will broadcast on the networks its condition to the maintenance company. We will no longer have electricians and plumbers who come out to fit taps that don't work. We will have electricians and plumbers who sit at home who actually monitor the systems. We will have people who look at the condition of a property from a distance just to make sure it's good. In other words, the world is going smart. And it is happening now. This year, 2012, we are started, it's beginning, it's continuing, and it will go on. And it's going to be something that transforms the way you operate. I'm going to wrap up my talk by saying this. Every generation believes that it lives in the most exciting times there have ever been. I know that our generation is on the verge of a dumb world becoming smart. And our children and their children will never know a book that doesn't work. They will never know a property that doesn't talk to them. And as I gaze from each one of you to another of you, I can see, if you choose to allow me to, who you are, who you work for, what you're selling, what you do, and if you want me to know, what your private interests are, whether it's golf or sailing or football, golf, whatever it may be. Welcome to the smart world of the future. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Ray, if I got it right, there was one crucial question that you asked yourself about what you were talking, and that question was, will I want?
Yes.
I would try to add a second question. Will I be asked whether I want?
Ah, yes, I understand. In other words, in a work capacity, if we're at work, I mean, you're on stage now as a moderator. You would want the entire audience to see all of the information about you that is relevant. You would want to, and whoever's employing you would say, that's probably a good thing, Peter, that's a good idea. But we all have choice. In other words, if I don't want to, I don't have to. But peer pressure, the pressure of professional environments, may force me to. Because if a buyer is dealing with one real estate professional who broadcasts everything and another who broadcasts nothing, which would you choose?
I'm not sure, really not.
Well, if I have everything broadcast to me, and we're talking only professional, I want it. I definitely want it, because I want to know...
How would you really definitely separate professional and personal in
well,
that world?
I mean, I might say, I'm Ray Hammond, I work for this company, I have been with them 7 years, I look after property in the 500,000 euro range to 1 million euro range, and I specialise in overseas buyers. Now that is useful, because at a glance, somebody can look at me and can see everything they need to know, because if they want to rent, they know it's not me. So I think it will be something that is automatic in business.
I can understand, and I see, of course, everybody will see the advantages of all those smart technologies. Yeah. Let's say the worry that many people have, and I have to confess, it's me too, is first how to separate and how to really make sure that there will be only broadcasted what I want that will be broadcasted. And the second is, there's an old sociological theory that says the worst society we can imagine is the one in which everybody is always honest to each other.
Well, let's be honest, on digital profiling, not everybody is honest.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
we would calculate this.
Yeah, I mean, I may be on a dating site. I mean, I'm actually married, but assuming I was single, and I might say that I'm 6'6" tall, and I might say I'm 35 years old, and I'm very thin. I can say it, but it wouldn't be true. So I'm afraid that humans will actually bend the truth, but then we make our own decisions about who we believe and who we don't, and we get to the truth if we can. But, you know, what you're reminding me is we're looking at it from where we are today. Imagine in 20 years' time, looking back and thinking, do you remember we used to ask ourselves about how do we separate the private and personal?
How could we?
Yeah, that was a real issue then. And all of a sudden we know that we do it automatically.
And one of the interesting things about that, I wouldn't say problem, one of the interesting things about is that we are, as you said, we are looking at it from our today's standpoint. Interestingly, what will be integrated and displayed in those smart technologies is also things that we published before we even could think about publishing.
Yes,
what about that? How will we deal with that?
I guess we have control over our own work, because if it's ours, even if it's from 20 or 30 years ago, it's ours. Now, if we have, I mean, for example, I'm sure there will be something I've written 30 or 40 years ago that I'm embarrassed by. Well, okay, I have to live with that, because it was 30 or 40 years ago, and we all have to go through a learning curve. But I actually think that if we have written it, we own it. we never lose ownership of that unless we choose to. And that changes everything because we have the ability to take it away if it's ours.
Do we have? That's an interesting thing because there's a new business obviously coming into place. It's sort of a digital contract killer.
Yes. Yes.
Digital death companies who would be smart enough
to take everything
away because it's not so easy.
Yeah, no, it isn't.
It's
that
not
easy,
done
no.
with closing a
No,
Facebook
no.
account.
That's right,
it's not
that's right.
done with giving a website offline. So that seems to be a new business
It's interesting
as well.
that you mentioned Facebook because I was using Facebook. I use Twitter, but I was using Facebook. And one day while I was using Facebook, I got a call and I needed to go and look at a hotel in a town somewhere. And I went from Facebook to the hotel, and I came back to Facebook. And the next day, when I went back on Facebook, on my page, there was a picture of the hotel, and the page said, Ray Hammond is interested in this hotel. I didn't give my permission for that, but actually, Facebook was charging the hotel for advertising on my page. So I decided to close my account. Have any of you here tried to close your Facebook account? Do you know how hard it is to close an account?
Even harder to get a provision from that advertising revenue.
Quite. I closed it. Trust me, I closed it. And it will stay closed because I don't like anyone using me to advertise without my permission.
The will I want to and will I be asked whether I want to question goes almost, I would say, through all those 6 big trends that you mentioned, and probably one of the, let's say, ethically most ambivalent is, of course, the medical issue and the genetic engineering. Yes. What is your view on all those ethical worries that are brought up now?
Well, Peter, you've really put your finger on the biggest issue facing us, ethics of the future. Because we are being faced with decisions of a sort that we've never had to face before, never. For example, let's assume that I was a younger man and my wife was pregnant, a bit like Prince William and Kate in London. And my wife has a fetus, an embryo in the womb, and the doctor says to me, Ray, we can do a DNA scan of the baby now. The baby's only 3 months old or whatever, but we can just do an operation, a procedure, and we have the baby's DNA. Would I want to do that?
I would say yes.
Okay. We want to know. And we find out in the DNA that there's a very high chance that baby will develop cystic fibrosis. That baby will develop leukemia. Now, what do? Do I abort the child if it's early enough? And if the child is born and I take out medical insurance for the child, do I tell the insurers? Now, because I've had my DNA decoded, they said, do you want to know your risk of Alzheimer's disease? And as
you would forget about it.
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah. Well, as you know, about 30% of people in the world have one marker that indicates Alzheimer's, 30%. Now, if you have that marker, it doesn't mean you're going to get Alzheimer's disease. And if you don't have the marker, it doesn't mean you are not going to get Alzheimer's disease. But it does indicate that you are more at risk. About 10% of people have 2 markers for the Alzheimer's disease. Now, if you have 2 markers, it doesn't mean you are definitely going to get Alzheimer's, and it doesn't mean if you don't have any markers, you're not going to get Alzheimer's.
But it's even more likely.
And about 1.7% have 3 markers. Now, if you have 3 markers, the chance of getting, what's that disease called, is very, very high. Now, I am an adopted child, which means I have no information about my biological parents. So when this idea came through, they said, do you want to know the results? What did I say, yes or no?
Yes.
Yes.
Because you want to know everything.
I said, yes. 3 weeks later, I got an email that said, the results of your Alzheimer's test are in. If you want to view the results, click here. My heart was going like this. Now, I'm getting to an age where Alzheimer's might be possible in the next 10 or 20 years. I don't know my own medical history. I clicked here, as they said. And what did I get? I got a legal disclaimer. I had to say that I had been to see my own doctor, and I had to say that I had already received counselling, and I was going to go back to see the counsellors after I'd read the results. So I said, yes, I have, and of course, I hadn't. I clicked through, and I have no markers for Alzheimer's disease. That doesn't mean I'm not going to get Alzheimer's, but it means I'm not definitely going to have Alzheimer's. This is the new world.
It's what I said is that it's all over those issues. It means that one could maybe even say a linear increase of smart technology would need would be an exponential increase of choices, and choices means decisions, yes or no.
In other words,
how can we cope with that?
In other words, it's going to get harder for us. You mean, as the world becomes smarter and we get more choices, the work is going to be tougher for humans.
It's going to be easier in the handling outside, but it's going to be tougher inside, because more possibilities means more choices. More choices means more stress somehow.
I am asked often, and I think you're asking this question, how do we cope with so much change? Is that roughly?
Yeah. The one thing is with change, and the other. My question is precisely how do we cope with that amount of choice?
Okay. I only have one answer, and it's an answer that I've thought about a lot and developed over the years, and that is what we're doing this morning. Funnily enough, it is lifelong learning. Now, I don't mean learning in a formal academic way. I don't mean examinations. I mean what we're doing here, which is exchanging ideas. In other words, as we work, we must still continue to learn all of the time, across a general and broad range of subjects. And what I'm employed to do, and what I've been doing for decades, is while you're at your desk or you're showing property, I'm researching, I'm writing. And I'm doing the work day in and day out, weekends, evenings, all of the time, which allows me to come and hopefully deliver something of value to audiences who may use part of that in their work. Lifelong learning is the only antidote I know to too much choice or too much change.
Well, since you were talking about the real estate business and we did not have the possibility for the audience so far to step in, I would like to ask whether anybody in the audience wants to state a question to Ray. Because it is really possible. Yes, last night somebody asked whether it was principally forbidden. No, it's not. Well, if not, I think you will be around for some time.
Yeah.
Everybody can state a question directly. Thank you very much. It was very inspiring.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you.